Welcome to Unlimited Horror Stories, the channel that brings you the most spine-chilling tales that will keep you up at night. In today's video, we have a story that will make you question everything you know about the world. In the harvest of horror, unearthing the truth behind the haunted Hayride, we follow the journey of three friends who stumble upon a dark and terrifying secret while visiting a haunted Hayride attraction. What they uncover is a horrifying truth about human trafficking and the lengths that people will go to for profit. As they delve deeper into the mystery, they face danger and peril at every turn, fighting for their own survival and the lives of innocent victims. But even as they come out victorious, they are left to grapple with the traumatic aftermath of their experience. This story is a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurks beneath the surface of our world, and the bravery and determination it takes to confront it. So, if you want to hear more stories like this, don't forget to support our channel by subscribing and hitting the notification bell. And as always, stay tuned for more unlimited horror stories. It was a chilly autumn evening, and the air was filled with the scent of pumpkin spice and the sounds of excited chatter. The local Halloween attraction, a haunted Hayride, had just opened for the season, and the town was buzzing with anticipation. People from all over the area flocked to the Hayride every year, eager for a good scare. Amelia and her best friend, Emma, had been looking forward to the Hayride for weeks. They were both avid horror fans and loved nothing more than getting spooked. They had dressed up in their scariest costumes and were practically bouncing with excitement as they made their way to the attraction. As they approached the Hayride, they could see that it was packed with people. The line stretched out into the parking lot, and the sound of screams and laughter could be heard from the distance. They joined the queue and waited, chatting excitedly about what they were about to experience. Finally, they made it to the front of the line and climbed onto the wagon, taking a seat on a pile of hay. The wagon was pulled by a tractor and rattled its way through the dark, spooky woods. The Hayride was filled with jump scares and creepy props, but Amelia and Emma were having the time of their lives. However, as the Hayride approached a particularly dark and foreboding section of the woods, something went wrong. The wagon suddenly jolted to a stop, and the lights flickered out. There was a moment of confusion, and then a scream pierced the darkness. Amelia and Emma were frozen in fear, unsure of what was happening. They heard shouting and scrambling around them, and then the wagon lurched forward again, picking up speed. But it wasn't until they had reached the end of the ride that they realized the full extent of the horror that had just occurred. One of the actors on the Hayride, a young woman, had been killed during the ride. She had been playing the part of a victim, tied to a stake and surrounded by fake flames. But something had gone horribly wrong, and the woman had been burned alive in front of the horrified spectators. Amelia and Emma were in shock as they stumbled off the Hayride, their hearts pounding with fear and sadness. They were surrounded by chaos as the police arrived on the scene, trying to piece together what had happened. The rest of the night was a blur of confusion and fear. The haunted Hayride was shut down, and the town was left reeling from the tragedy that had occurred. Amelia and Emma could barely sleep that night, haunted by the memory of the woman's screams and the realization that they had just witnessed a horrific accident. Little did they know, this was just the beginning of a nightmare that would consume their lives in the coming weeks. In the days following the tragedy at the haunted Hayride, Amelia and Emma struggled to come to terms with what had happened. They couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about the whole incident. They knew accidents happened, but it didn't feel like that was the whole story. As they talked about it more and more, they began to realize that they wanted to investigate further. Amelia, in particular, felt a strong sense of obligation to find out what really happened to the woman who had died. They had to know if there was anything that could have been done to prevent her death. They started by scouring the local news reports, trying to find any information that wasn't already known to the public. They also reached out to people they knew who had worked at the haunted Hayride in previous years, hoping to get some insight into how things were run behind the scenes. As they dug deeper, they started to uncover some troubling details. They learned that the woman who had died, whose name was Sarah, had been a relatively new employee. She had only been working at the Hayride for a few weeks, and there were rumors that she had been hired hastily to replace another employee who had quit suddenly. They also discovered that the Hayride had a history of safety violations. They found records of previous accidents and injuries, as well as reports of dangerous working conditions. They began to wonder if Sarah's death was really an accident, or if there was something more sinister at play. Their investigation took them all over town, as they interviewed witnesses and pieced together a timeline of events leading up to the tragedy. They even snuck into the Hayride's property late one night, hoping to uncover some clues that had been overlooked by the police. As they poked around, they stumbled upon a locked shed that they hadn't noticed before. They managed to pick the lock and open the door, revealing a small room filled with props and costumes. But there was something else in the room that caught their attention, a small stack of papers, neatly organized on a desk in the corner. As they looked closer, they realized that the papers were invoices for a company that supplied the Hayride with fake flames and other pyrotechnics. But what was strange was that the invoices were addressed to a different company name than the one that ran the Hayride. It was almost as if the Hayride was a front for some other operation. This discovery only fueled their suspicions further. They were convinced that there was more going on at the haunted Hayride than anyone knew. They knew they had to keep investigating, even if it meant putting themselves in danger. Amelia and Emma's investigation into the haunted Hayride had led them down a dark path, filled with danger and uncertainty. But they were determined to get to the bottom of what had happened to Sarah, and to uncover the truth about the Hayride's operations. As they continued their research, they came across a strange connection between the Hayride and a local construction company. They discovered that the company had been hired to do some work on the Hayride's property, but the nature of the work was unclear. They dug deeper and eventually found evidence that the construction company was a front for a larger criminal organization. They realized that the Hayride was being used as a cover for illegal activities, and that Sarah's death was not an accident at all. It was a carefully orchestrated murder, meant to cover up the criminal activity happening at the Hayride. Amelia and Emma were horrified by what they had uncovered. They knew that they had to go to the police with their findings, but they also knew that it was risky. They didn't know who they could trust, and they were afraid of what might happen if they were caught. One night, as they were walking home from the library where they had been researching, they heard footsteps behind them. They turned around to see a group of men in dark clothing, their faces obscured by masks. The men started to approach them, and Amelia and Emma knew that they were in serious trouble. They started to run, but the men were faster. They chased them through the streets, and Amelia and Emma were only able to escape by ducking into a nearby alleyway and hiding behind a dumpster. They stayed there, shaking and terrified, until they were sure that the men had given up. They knew that they couldn't keep investigating on their own. They needed help, and they needed it fast. They decided to reach out to Sarah's family, hoping that they could provide some support and guidance. To their surprise, Sarah's sister was already aware of their investigation. She had been following their progress and had even done some research of her own. Together, they were able to piece together the final elements of the conspiracy that had led to Sarah's death. They discovered that the criminal organization had been using the Hayride as a front for money laundering and other illegal activities. Sarah had stumbled upon their operation, and they had killed her to keep her quiet. Armed with this knowledge, Amelia and Emma went to the police. They provided them with all of the evidence that they had gathered, and worked closely with the detectives to build a case against the criminal organization. In the end, justice was served. The criminals were arrested, and the hayride was shut down for good. But for Amelia and Emma, the experience was life-changing. They had gone from innocent teenagers to amateur detectives, risking everything to uncover the truth. They had learned that sometimes, the scariest things aren't the ghosts and monsters that we see on Halloween, but the real-life horrors that hide in the shadows. As the investigation into the haunted hayride continued, Amelia and Emma found themselves in a race against time. They knew that the criminals behind Sarah's death were dangerous and would stop at nothing to keep their operation secret. They also knew that they were getting close to the truth, and that their lives were in danger. Amelia and Emma spent their days poring over the evidence they had gathered, looking for any leads that would help them uncover the truth. They visited the site of the hayride multiple times, hoping to find any clues that had been missed by the police. One day, as they were walking around the hayride, they noticed a strange sound coming from one of the barns. It was a faint scratching noise, like something was trying to claw its way out. They followed the sound, and it led them to a small, locked door at the back of the barn. They tried to open the door, but it was locked tight. They knew that they needed to get inside, but they didn't have any tools to break the lock. As they were standing there, trying to figure out what to do, they heard footsteps approaching. They turned around to see a group of men, the same ones who had chased them through the streets a few nights before. Amelia and Emma ran, trying to get away from the men. They knew that they couldn't outrun them for long, but they had to try. They ran through the barns, trying to lose the men in the maze of hay and stalls. But they soon realized that they were trapped. The men had surrounded them, and there was no way out. Just as they were about to be caught, they heard a loud noise coming from the locked door. It sounded like something was breaking through the wood. They looked over, and saw that the door had been forced open from the inside. A figure emerged, and Amelia and Emma could see that it was Sarah's brother, who had been helping them with their investigation. He motioned for them to follow him, and they ran towards the open door. As they passed through, they saw a horrific sight. Inside the small room were cages filled with people, all of them bound and gagged. They were being held captive by the criminal organization, used as pawns in their illegal activities. Amelia and Emma were shocked by what they saw. They had stumbled upon a horrifying human trafficking operation, and they knew that they had to get the people out of there as soon as possible. They worked quickly, untying the people from their restraints and leading them out of the barn. They could hear the men chasing them, getting closer and closer. They knew that they had to move quickly, but they didn't know where to go. As they were running, Sarah's brother pulled out his phone and called the police. He gave them the location of the barn, and told them about the people being held captive inside. They knew that the police would be there soon, but they had to keep the people safe until they arrived. They led the captives towards the edge of the property, hoping to find a way out. But as they reached the edge, they saw that the men had cut them off. They were trapped, with nowhere to go. Amelia and Emma knew that they had to fight back. They may have been outnumbered, but they were determined to protect the innocent people who had been held captive for so long. They picked up whatever they could find, rocks, sticks, and hay bales, and prepared to defend themselves. The men attacked, but Amelia and Emma fought back with all their might. They swung their makeshift weapons, hitting the men where they could. It was a fierce. As Amelia and Emma fought off the men who had trapped them and the captives at the edge of the haunted hayride property, they knew that this was their final confrontation. They had uncovered a horrifying human trafficking operation, and they were determined to put an end to it. Despite being outnumbered, Amelia and Emma fought with all their might. They swung their makeshift weapons, hitting the men where they could. It was a fierce battle, but Amelia and Emma refused to give up. They knew that they were fighting for something important, and that they had to protect the innocent people who had been held captive for so long. The men fought back, but they were no match for Amelia and Emma's determination. Slowly but surely, they managed to take down their attackers one by one. It was a brutal fight, with injuries on both sides, but Amelia and Emma refused to back down. As the last of the attackers fell to the ground, Amelia and Emma realized that they had won. They had put an end to the human trafficking operation, and they had saved the lives of the innocent people who had been held captive for so long. As they caught their breath and tended to their injuries, the police arrived on the scene. They had been tipped off by Sarah's brother, who had called them when they had first discovered the captives. The police were shocked by what they saw, but they were grateful to Amelia and Emma for their bravery and determination. Over the next few days, the police conducted a thorough investigation into the human trafficking operation. They discovered that the criminals had been using the haunted Hayride as a cover for their illegal activities. They had been abducting people from the Hayride and using them as pawns in their operation. It was a horrifying realization, but it explained the strange occurrences at the Hayride over the years. Amelia and Emma were hailed as heroes for their bravery in uncovering the human trafficking operation. They were praised for their determination and their refusal to back down in the face of danger. They had saved the lives of the innocent people who had been held captive, and they had put an end to a heinous crime. But for Amelia and Emma, the victory was bittersweet. They had lost their friend Sarah, and they knew that they could never truly replace her. They had uncovered a horrifying truth about the world, and it had left them feeling shaken and disillusioned. In the end, they realized that their friendship was stronger than ever. They had been through a harrowing experience together, and it had brought them closer than ever before. They knew that they would always be there for each other, no matter what life threw their way. As they looked out at the haunted Hayride, now abandoned and empty, they knew that they had truly conquered their fear. They had faced down their worst nightmares and emerged victorious. And they knew that they could face anything that the future held, as long as they had each other. Amelia and Emma sat in the hospital waiting room, waiting for news on their friend Sarah's condition. It had been a few days since the final confrontation at the haunted Hayride, and Sarah had been rushed to the hospital after being injured in the fight. As they sat there, Amelia and Emma couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened. They had gone to the haunted Hayride expecting a fun night out, but they had uncovered a horrifying truth about the world. They had fought off attackers, uncovered a human trafficking operation, and saved the lives of innocent people. But even with all of their bravery and determination, they had still lost their friend Sarah. It was a painful reminder that even in the face of victory, there were still losses to be mourned. Finally, a doctor came out to speak with them. Sarah was stable, but she had sustained some serious injuries. She would need surgery and a long period of recovery, but the doctor was optimistic about her chances. Amelia and Emma breathed a sigh of relief, grateful that their friend was going to be okay. But they also knew that their lives had been forever changed by what had happened. Over the next few weeks, Amelia and Emma found themselves dealing with the aftermath of the haunted Hayride. They were interviewed by the police and local news outlets, hailed as heroes for their bravery in uncovering the human trafficking operation. They were praised for their quick thinking and determination, but they also found themselves reliving the traumatic experience over and over again. They attended Sarah's bedside, bringing her flowers and gifts to lift her spirits. They watched as she slowly regained her strength, and they knew that they would always be there for her, no matter what. As time passed, the haunted Hayride was shut down for good. The owners had been shocked to discover what had been happening on their property, and they had no choice but to close the attraction permanently. It was a small victory, but it was a step towards justice for the victims of the human trafficking operation. Amelia and Emma also found themselves grappling with their own fears and anxieties in the wake of the haunted Hayride. They had faced down their worst nightmares and emerged victorious, but they knew that the memories of that night would stay with them forever. Despite the trauma, Amelia and Emma knew that they had grown stronger as a result of their experience. They had proven to themselves and to each other that they were capable of great bravery and determination, even in the face of overwhelming danger. As they looked back on their experience at the haunted hayride, Amelia and Emma knew that they had been through something truly harrowing. But they also knew that they had emerged from it stronger and more resilient than ever before. And they knew that they would always have each other to rely on, no matter what the future held.